Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Shooting the Shift. It's been a bit of a week in UK motorsport. So quickly, the intros. That's Milton.
Hello.
That's Matt.
Oh,
That's Brent. Every
hi.
week. And that's Mac Frost.
The man who always has two names. Nobody ever calls him just Mac.
So
That's so true.
That's a motorsport thing, though, isn't it?
Well, I don't know, because like even his baby mama calls him Mac Frost all the time, like both words.
So I think everybody who watches this podcast will have seen Facebook this week by now. Last week,
Controversy.
all the news breaking, and we'll get to that. We will get to that, but I'm gonna open, Mac, with the first question that I asked John last week as well. Last week we were on, which is what the fuck makes someone buy a race series, mate?
So for me, it was just like either I had to buy it or I had to find something else to do in my life, because I already worked full time for the championship and I was already the manager of the series. So when Matt Stevenson decided to step down, he basically said to me, like, you know, you've got first dibs on buying it if you want it, and if not, there's no guarantee that whoever buys it will keep you on. I'll like hope that they do, but and I thought about it and I thought I was just in the perfect position at that time of both knowing the drivers, already working with all the sponsors and the partners. The year was already pretty planned out, already ran the team. I was just like, it's pretty straightforward to step in and do it. And I was kind of excited to get my own control over things fully as well. So, you know, we did that. We did a great year in 2021 and it was good.
Yeah. So 2019, you started as general manager.
Yes.
And in 2021, you bought the thing, right?
Yeah.
And then this dude ate a bat in China. That can't have been a fun time for trying to put on race events.
Yeah, so the pandemic thing, like, it literally went from us reading about it on Facebook and hearing a bit about it on the news and going, yeah, we've got an event in like a month at Three Sisters for the first round of 2020, and we put out a press release on either a Thursday or a Friday night that was like, yeah, we're still going to run the first round. It's an outdoor event. There'll only be a couple of thousand people. Like, we'll be fine. And everyone was like, yeah. Then by Monday, we were like, and it's cancelled. Sorry, guys, just because of like everything was cancelling then. So that kind of hysteria that kicked in suddenly, like we had to cancel everything. So
it's a and that has to have been a chaotic start to a directorship of a race series, sort of the pandemic. And
bear in mind though that in 2020 when all that happened, Matt was still the owner.
Yeah.
So he navigated all of that first bit and I worked behind the scenes sort of running things. If it wasn't for him, the business wouldn't have got through that year. He's very savvy with money and business generally, so he got it through there. And at the end of that year, the business was not in a good state, obviously, because multiple cancelled events, drivers owed money, sponsors owed money. Like, it, you know, it was what it was, but it was all managed to a point where you could take it over, which I did. So yeah, it was hard and it was super surreal to go from running events with like 2,000 people at them to the event we ran at Driftland where there was no crowd and everything was limited of how many people were there. I know Bryn was there. You were there, right, Bryn? Like,
yeah, it was weird. It was really weird.
300 or 400 people at the most on site for this event. There was no crowd noise. There was no music. It was just like, yeah, it was weird.
I think this is why Bryn asked us for a safe word. You can see him; he's getting a bit teary-eyed at the thought of it again. You know, it's one of those things. You go to any event you went to during those 2 years, and I expect, like, obviously we've always said this for me. I don't really get, or I didn't get drifting until I came to BDC with Milton. Not that long ago, in fact. Because I'm a grippy boy, and it's not really my thing. But any motorsport, the roar of the crowd, the sound of people talking about it, the emotions that are there, that's got to just disappear, right? When you've got no crowds, you've got the noise of the tire squeal's still there. But,
Atmosphere.
yeah,
The word you're looking for.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, like Milton said, I mean, the atmosphere just wasn't the same, and that was like the podium. You imagine when there's the podium and no one's allowed to be at the podium, and the drivers are there and they have to put face masks on, and it was like,
Yeah, I remember watching that when Formula One got going again, because I think they were one of the first motorsport series to get going again. And they did a round at Austria, and they had this silly robot giving out the trophies, and all the drivers are stood really far apart, and it's like there's no atmosphere, and this is really awkward.
But that was how it was at the time. I mean, I did a few rounds of marshalling for you during all of that, and even the marshals on track, we had to be wearing masks and stuff because that was the rules. That's how everything had to be.
in fact,
Unless you're Matt Hancock.
2021 round one, my first event is that the Teesside one with all the walls and all the craziness. That event was supposed to be at everyone in the venue wears a mask event, and then it was like a 30-degree heat wave, and we didn't particularly enforce it, and the venue didn't particularly enforce it, and someone from the council COVID safety team came and signed everything off as being great, so that's fine. But even at that point, then we were supposed to do that.
And then obviously life starts returning back to normal for everybody. Did the crowds come back? Was it quieter?
Yeah, we ran Driftland event round 2 with some restrictions but minimal, and there was like a spectator area and a driver and crew area, so they were separated like that. And then from Three Sisters we moved back to open pits, full crowd capacity, and then by the time we got to night fight, it was like the venue was very full. That was probably I think that was probably the busiest Teesside event of all time. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, with how many people we had there. So,
and we should definitely circle back around. Night fight was a good point to come back to. But that I remember that Three Sisters event, and that was almost as surreal as the ones where there was nobody, because, like you say, the crowd was huge all of a sudden, and standing on the track looking out at the crowd was like, oh yeah, this is back.
We had more people at Three Sisters last year than we did this year. That's like how big the crowd was when there were no restrictions, and that venue has a great crowd. Like any drift promoters watching this, book events at Three Sisters, because that place brings people out to it just from the local in thousands. So yeah.
So that was a good moment, seeing when it all got lifted again, and everyone clearly had this pent up that they wanted to be back, and just people flocked to that event.
Yeah, and that was the first time that we brought in big names from Europe as well, because we got Sebastian, Clint, Connor Shanahan. There was a really good grid for that too. So 97. I think 97 drivers in the end we had for it.
It's a crazy amount of drivers as well.
Yeah.
Pits must have been packed.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just think this year when we did it and it was packed, there were 83. And on top of that, also Sebastian and Clint come with the biggest lorry you can imagine, multi-car loader vehicle. So yeah, it's...
I can say we obviously we were there at Three Sisters this year, and I thought the pits was packed, and trying to cram 9 more drivers in there and all crew and everything. That's I think that's probably the smallest pit area of all the tracks you go to.
It is. It's the best venue for the crowd, and it's the toughest for the operational side of the logistics of the event and how things work. So it's the hardest one. So yeah.
So then Bryn's obviously got questions about Night Fight. Far away, Bryn. He just wants to relive it. Tell us.
I don't want to ruin your flow, but
I've got no flow after this. I was getting that bit out of the way, and then you boys know a lot more than me.
But I'm gonna come back. I want to pick things up a bit once we start getting a little bit.
Once we get to the depressing stuff,
you have to do it like a sandwich: good, bad, and then good again.
So what,
sandwich.
It's shit sandwich time. We're probably in the middle, so it's time for some shit, I guess. So we've all obviously seen the news, Mick. So tell us what's prompted the decision. What's been going on, mate?
Okay, so really going from Night Fight, like at the back end of that year, which superficially looked like a great year. You know, we did a lot of work for the brand. We kind of picked BDC back up in its reputation. A lot of people said it had been the best season for X amount of years. I like loved the ending that we had to it, but it wasn't an incredibly financially successful year. In fact, it was actually a pretty terrible year because, just putting it out there, like the business was in a bad state at the beginning of the year, and me running everything to 110% did not help that. So like the money side of the business is weird to talk about, but I don't know if people have any idea of how much these events cost, but Teesside round 1 that year with all the walls, that event cost £70,000 to put on. That was the cost to do it. And that was an event where basically every driver drove for free or close to it. Like some of them did that in the fact that they got like discount on their season entry because they were owed potentially 2 rounds from the year before. Sponsors were all on reduced rates because they were owed rounds from the year before. And like we could only have, in total of crew and spectators, we were limited to 1,000 people total. So you straight away write off like 400 people for crew and then 600 spectators, but like 50% of them were on a transferred ticket from the year before. So we just took like a monumental loss on that first event. But what was important was it was better than UKDC. That was literally the only mission I had, was that UKDC had just done round 1 and it was shit. No offense, like it was. And we rinsed it with having a ton of drivers, the walls, this massive show. And we had photographers hired for head shoots for the drivers. We had like a full crazy merch range. We had everything that we could put into that event from a cost, but we just did it. It just didn't have to make sense. And I kind of carried a lot of that mentality. I made the live stream free. It was meant to be on Insider. And then I said, I want people to see how good the live stream is and how much we've worked on all the graphics and the system. So we made it free. That was another like £12,000 decision. And I just kind of kept that mentality through the year of like, just go all out, make the brand as good as it can be, make people see how good UK drifting is. Like just show it, all these drivers made the drifting so good. Like at the end of the year, when we finished that, the ramifications of then spending another 60 something grand on Night Fight with all the lights and all the other bits and pieces that we threw at it. And Teesside's expensive to hire. It's a good venue, but it's expensive to hire, like 20 grand or something all in to get it. So once you put all that there, you kind of got to the end of the year and went, shit, like we're in trouble. And basically through personal things in my life, I was in a position where I could kind of bail it out and reinvest into the business, like tens of thousands of pounds to put back in again. So I did put everything, like literally everything I had into it, and went float it to next year. We had this big deal with Vosner that was meant to be coming again. And we said, we'll be fine. I brought in the control tire. That was going to bring money in. That wasn't the primary reason we were doing it, but it was another thing that was like, we're going to make good money from this. So it all seemed fine. Obviously then we got a lot less drivers. The control tire thing didn't entirely play out. It was good for a lot of reasons, but there were reasons it wasn't great. And then Vosner pulled out the day before we launched the season. You got to think that was like, again, deal with tens of thousands of pounds that was gone.
Is that legal? Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, because there was no contract signed. We just had it verbally. So they were supposed to return the contract. It got to the point where we went, right, you're not going to be on the poster if it's not done by tomorrow and the money's not paid. And they were like, sorry, we can't do it for XYZ reason. Then they sponsored Drift Pro, which was kicking
the nuts.
But, yeah, but so something else. So right from round 1 this year, it was like a real struggle to have things be right. We delivered round one. Again, you know, we had a big PA system. We had a massive big screen in the venue. The costs of everything were just going up and up and up. And we run an event like that with, when you count all the live stream people, you count all the gridding staff, the off-track team, everyone, there'll be like well over 30 staff, sometimes getting towards 40 staff at these events. They all get paid. A lot of them do it like on a semi-voluntary basis. No one's making good money, but people are getting paid. So you get thousands of pounds in wages. Like, it was just tough. We came away from round one, again, kind of taking a loss. And it was like, oh, that's a heavy position to be in. And ahead of that round, I was saying to people, like, you know, we need this big support for the business. We've had the big break. That didn't help. Costs kept going up, kept going up, kept going up. Then the Driftland event, Driftland Festival, 5 days, was supposed to be like trying to like recreate an Awesome Fest type thing. Completely flopped. Spent £67,000 on that event. Took close to a 20 grand loss on it. And obviously then all the bullshit online afterwards, which we already talked about on the Origin. So that is what it is. At that point, it was so close to being over. And it was only because other people who had a vested interest, who basically lent money to the business, that it could even continue. And when round three, just the crowd wasn't what it needed to be. The drivers still weren't really, you know, we didn't have a strong grid again. Every avenue of income that you're supposed to be getting mid-season just wasn't coming in. And that's like, the amount of stress to even make that T-side happen was like horrific. And coming away from it again, that was another point where I went, God, it's over. We're not even going to see these last two rounds. And that's where, you know, we made changes. We did wild cards, just changed the Buxton event to the event we ran with Neil, the you know, Matt Sowery collab. And some people didn't like those changes. Some people have shitted on those changes like publicly and said, oh, I shouldn't have done this, shouldn't have done that. But if we hadn't have done it, there wouldn't have been an end to the season. So we kind of got through the season. Again, we had the Silverstone demos lined up. That isn't a free demos thing where, or we don't get paid to go and do it. That's like a motorsport industry event and you have to rent the garages and they're thousands of pounds to rent. It's like £6,000 or something for the garages. And that's when Helix Autosport stepped in and they were like, hey, we want to support BDC. We'll pay for you guys to go to the demo. So we gave back to the drivers who'd supported us the most. And we like took 10 people to Silverstone for 2 days of demos. And by the time we got there, behind the scenes, coming off the back of Buxton, which again, all the controversy and the bullshit and the things that impacted it financially, it was in a bad state. And I wasn't sure what the future would hold. And then coming back from Silverstone, you know, we were hoping to pitch to big sponsors and do this and that. And that event wasn't what it lived up to be the year before. And yeah, we were just in a horrendous situation. That's when I had to sit down with Chris, like, who does all the videos, 69 Production, and sort of say, I think this could be over if we don't get lucky in the next few weeks with something big, and that something big hasn't come. So ultimately, for the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've been having to, like, this is what I said just before we went live, which is that everybody's like, oh, how is it now this week? And I mean, yeah, this week's not been great, but you've got to think the months of stress before for me now to go, well, it's over. Actually, this week, once you got over all the bullshit, has not been that bad because we finally just had to. I always said, like, it wasn't over until I give up. And in the end, I didn't give up because I went, oh, I don't want to do it anymore. I've given up because from a financial perspective, it doesn't make sense. And when I can't pay myself or I can't pay my staff, and this is a full-time position, I've got a kid, it's just before Christmas, I'm like, what am I going to do? Just run it into the ground completely, like, you know? So yeah, that's just prompted the decision purely from a financial perspective, like, it just hasn't worked out. Like, and it's mainly, if you had to put it down to one thing, it is a lack of support, and that's not from any one group of people. It's not just because drivers didn't drive, it's not because sponsors didn't pay enough, it's not because not enough fans came, it's because of a little bit of all of them. And when you think these events cost tens of thousands of pounds, and I don't want to ramble here, but people, the second that you take something out of an event, so from after round one, we didn't have a big screen at the events this year because big screen, it's like $3,000 to get that for the weekend. It's expensive, like, and it's the first thing you can just chop out the budget because it doesn't add a load to the event. Do you know what I mean? People still watch the drifting. So, and then the flack we caught for, wow, why isn't that there? Why isn't this? We paid 40 quid for a weekend ticket and this isn't even there. And you're like, well, yeah, it's because not enough tickets are selling, or not enough tickets are selling on pre-sale.
You'd have to make the tickets 50 quid or each one. It's
in 2021, one of our biggest benefits to the business was that because events had been restricted, when tickets went on sale and there were limited numbers, the first thing people do is, I need to get my ticket to BDC so that I can go. That's gone this year. And pre-sale dropped from being like 70% of tickets sold at pre-sale, or round one been entirely sold out, to 30% of tickets are sold in advance. And you've got to think, when we're having to outlay 40, 50 grand ahead of the event, where's that money coming from?
Well, this is something that I actually do want to touch on, because I've seen quite a lot of this kind of behind the scenes throughout the year in a way. And a lot of the flack that you're getting even now from people, and it's the same thing with all the organisers of the championship. Everyone always says, oh, that person, they're looking to make money. Oh, it's all about the making money. I know firsthand that it's the opposite is what's going on. Mac has been putting the money in, and you're trying to, you're trying to make money. Yeah, like you say, you've got to cut the big screen out. It's not because he's trying to make more profit. It's because he's trying to keep the events running. This man has genuinely spent his whole year just trying to keep everything going. And from the outside, people look at that of, oh, you're just trying to make more and more profit. And that is absolutely not what's going on.
The problem is, he wasn't trying to make more and more profit. He was trying to make profit. I think that's the key here.
Yeah, I wouldn't even try to make profit. I was trying to cover cost.
And I think that's a really important thing that people need to understand is, if you take into account paying someone a salary, right? And Mac has to do that because he's got a home and he's got a kid and he's got a missus, and you've got to pay for those things. You can't live off the goodwill of people, right? That actually taking a salary and breaking even, that would have potentially, I imagine, Mac, probably been enough, to go, well,
don't forget though, not just my salary. There were three of us for the majority of 2021 and 22. None of us got a good wage by any means.
I apply the logic to that because obviously we speak a lot as guys who know business of you being a decent human being and a good manager, thinking you'd have been the last guy to take the salary as well. You'd have been the last guy to be taking the money out from what I know of you anyway, and that's a really hard position to be in as a business.
Yeah, like by the end of this year, the business owed me 4 months of wages.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Plus all the loans I'd made to the business. So people who are like, I seen it now, especially with the raffle, oh, Max run off with all this money in his pocket. I'm like, I exited this business with like, no money, no money in the business. So it was me crazy amounts of money and it's gone. And it's like, that's hard to deal with, but that's it. And it was the same thing in 2020 with Matt when he had to get it through COVID, where people got upset about things not being the same or whatever. And that was part of what fed into the whole rift that formed UKDC. And then again, that's the same thing this year that's fed into things falling apart. And it's tough, man. People don't want it to succeed. Everybody spends so much money in drifting. Nobody wants to think anybody else makes money. But nobody thinks twice about going and buying a new Wise Fab for like $1,500, or buying, do you know what I mean? All these parts manufacturers that charge crazy money for all these parts. Do they sponsor drivers? Not really. Like a little discount here and there. Do they sponsor championship? Not the majority of them. Then you get good brands that actually do put in, like the brands we work with this year, and they're great because they support the community. But so many of them, I don't want to flame no big companies, but there's big companies with drift in the name that don't put them back into drifting, and that sucks. That's so backwards. Like
it's that whole thing, it's and sometimes it's an altitude thing, right? I mean, we do what we can for Formula G, right? And in the last year, I talked to you when we were at Three Sisters about what I've had going on. That's not been a lot, other than occasionally go to John, this is a sensible thing. I'll have a look through the business chat, yeah? But even little old us that does sod all money, putting back into the sport where we can. If more people put back into the sport and went, actually, this is a thing I care about, and we're as a culture, we are under threat from electric cars, environmentaloids, and all kinds of stuff. Birmingham City Council, there's a thing that threatens us day in, day out. They're trying to ban meats again. But all this stuff is part against us. If we're not supporting ourselves and looking after those that are taking the time out to put on events and putting things on and not being idiots when we leave those events. Yeah, that's right. The arch Mexican has said it. Don't be an idiot when you're leaving an event. If we're not supporting the things that we care about, they're going to be gone in 10, 20 years' time. Like, my lifetime, I can see the road ahead, the road we're walking right now is the end of so much stuff I care about. And that's really sad. Bryn, please bring us some good stories to cheer everybody up now that I've done that.
No pressure.
I'm not ready for that yet.
Max, I've got some quick fire questions for you, Max.
I wanted to circle back around to the costs. Because we had this conversation with John last week, specifically about concrete walls.
Yeah.
And I think it's more prominent in drifting because everybody wants to see drivers run the wall and tear the back off the car and all the rest of it. But actually, as we discovered last week, putting a wall where there isn't a wall is not cheap, especially when you have as many as you have in drifting.
Yeah. So round 1, 2021, the walls event, we spent, I want to say it was £5,000 plus VAT. So like £6,000 outlaid for walls to get them. The majority of the cost isn't hiring the walls. You actually hire the walls for like 30
it's the truck.
It's moving them.
Yeah. Big truck that brings them in. And then how are you moving them when they get there? Like, you need a telehandler. So I'm like, all right, £500 to hire a telehandler for the weekend. I'm like, okay, I need a guy to drive it. Who's got
you need someone who can drive it, which a lot of people.
We know people who know people. We got a guy for £200 or whatever for the weekend. That's another £700. Then by the time you've got that guy needs a hotel room. We were feeding all our staff real good that year, like a Costco buffet and
that was so good. No, it wasn't good. It was terrible. The buffet was
awful.
We had the worst buffet that we could physically eat to put those events on.
But we looked after staff. That was the big thing. Was always for me was like because I wanted to build a team that was loyal, and so we weren't cycling people as much, and that was why we treated staff. We started paying staff a little bit more. We made sure everybody gets a hotel room where there's 2 people in a room, not like 5 people in a room. And we looked after people as good as we could.
It still wasn't ridiculous though, was it? I mean, the buffets were Costco buffets. The wage that, I was getting when I was marshalling for you, it's not a good wage. It's less than you get paid for your day job, but it's enough to cover you to be there and help and run the event.
Some of those lads who get that wage, they'll come to set up on a Thursday afternoon. They'll work a shift until 10 o'clock at night. Then they'll marshal all day Friday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday with no breaks, 12 hours a day. And then at the end, they stay and rip the event down. Those people are dedicated.
It was killer. It was killer. I mean, I work a desk job, so I can tell you at the end of one of the weekends working for Matt, I was dead. I could barely move. It was a hard weekend's work, but it was worth it.
I think this is the other thing to cover is when people think about a VDC event, they think Friday, Saturday, Sunday. When actually you're there on Thursday setting up and you're there on Monday taking it all down again.
Yeah,
so it's a 5.
We took everything down on Sunday. We never left
Sunday.
Anything.
Okay.
And we also had Wednesday at the unit to load everything up, to load the truck and all the gear.
You've got to get there.
Ready. And one thing going back to walls, the round 1 walls, like we hadn't already spent enough of whatever that was, nearly £7,000 on walls. Then they came and picked the walls up, and the company got back in touch with us and went, yeah, these walls are really damaged. So we're actually going to charge you like another £1,000 for damaging some of these walls. Yeah. And I'm like, you're fucking kidding me. That's what the walls are there for, like to get hit. And other fun fact about that event, I originally planned that out. so that, you know, we ran it backwards. You had the wall along initiation, and then we had the wall as you came into the first hairpin. Actually, originally that wall was going to go all the way round that hairpin. And then we released that track map to drivers, and quite a lot of people like, that's kind of suicide. Like, I don't really want to write my car off at the start of the year. And there was a bit of debate around it. And actually Dave Egan phoned me and he said, I'm going to bring my Corvette and I don't care. I'll run it all the way around them walls. But just know every time someone hits one of those blocks, you have to stop everything to reset it. And just think, if you line the whole thing, you're going to be stopping to reset it constantly. Irony that at the last round of DMEC, that is exactly what they did and exactly what went wrong. But
we've had that before at Pod, because we marshal at Pod, and there's like 8 blocks just to protect the buildings, and they're not linked and they're off the racing line. But as soon as one hits that, it's a 30-minute downtime.
Yeah, because you have to think these cars are 1 ton to 2 tons, and you hit them at some speed, and they do move 6 feet. It's not like you're just nudging them.
Max Fleckney hit one of the walls so hard head on in his Corolla, he knocked it over.
Oh mate, Max, that poor event. He kept fixing his car and coming back out and crashing again. And like, I just wanted to be like, please just stop.
Take the keys off that man.
But no, let's talk about something there, because you brought up something really good there. Dave Egan phoned you up and gave you a little bit of advice. Now, how do you get that a lot from him, from Matt? How useful was that, having these guys that have already been there who are willing to say to you, here's what you need to know?
Specific to Dave Egan, I knew Dave a little bit from him driving in BDC and me being the manager, and a bit of a courtesy. I've been to Ireland to go to Drift Masters over there, so he'd been hospitable to us. So I knew him a little bit. And then when I bought the business, he was actually one of the very first people that I called to both make sure he was going to drive in BDC that year and just to build that relationship. I came into BDC in the Dave Egan era, so that was like someone I really looked up to and inspired me. And in the beginning, he gave me so much good advice on the brand and what to do and certain other things I'm not going to disclose. But yeah, he was a great ear to have, and we've always maintained like a friendly chat. And I just took away his title of the person who ruined drifting, so he can thank me for that later. So yeah. But no, and then Matt is someone I've got like infinite respect for, because in the beginning of all this, when I found BDC on the live stream and kind of got in touch and went, hey, I could do media for you guys. I've seen Slide at BDC. He gave me the shot. He brought me on. He did it. Then he bought BDC, and then he brought me in as the manager and literally taught me so much. And we're still really good mates. This year, again, when I got in financial trouble, he was like the first person I went to and went, I'm in deep. And he looked at it and went, you fucking idiot. Like, and yeah, he helped me so much with it. And yeah, still to this day, we talk all the time, and he gives me advice. And even now, when I'm lining up for what happens next, he's still trying to help me. So yeah,
that's good.
I have some questions, Mac.
Go for it.
What out of all the time you've been running BDC, what's your favourite car that's ever competed?
My favourite car that's ever competed in BDC. There's 2 ways to look at it. There's like, I like things that are really unique from a marketing perspective, because if it's something that gets attention, then that's great. So there are cars like Dave's Corvette was obviously one from that kind of perspective, but is my heart really in that? No. Like, so I like kind of styled out, low, cool looking drift cars. So there's a few.
Good. Put one up.
He's not going to
one on the table.
Any, is he?
You can have a favourite. It's not biased. Doesn't own the championship anymore, so
yeah, exactly.
It's not biased. You can't say I really like the MX-5s.
Milton, you just ripped that plaster right off there, mate.
No, I don't know. When you like, there's so many things that I've dealt with in it that have just like ruined drift cars for me. Like of when you've seen a million nice drift cars, a million good pro spec cars. I think overall, if you had to say what's the coolest or the best thing ever, like Sultan's Aston Martin thing that came that was bonkers. That like nuts. So probably that, just because it's cool and weird. And
do you know which car or chassis was the most successful in BDC?
what was the most successful.
I can tell you what chassis.
I would say an S13 has probably got to be way up there. That's like also the top two most used chassis in BDC in recent years are S13s and E36s. I don't think anyone with an E36 has ever won the championship, I'm going to say, but
McConnell got close.
Not in the modern era. I don't think.
Yeah, like I say, definitely not pro, but Pro 2. Didn't somebody win? Recently?
Oh, maybe in Pro 2. Maybe in Pro 2. I'm just talking pro, like top.
Yeah, so we're talking.
Yeah, Pro 2. We don't count, Matt. We're rubbish.
They just give those licenses out now.
Yeah, I was gonna say you've got a license now, but it's no good to you.
Those cars just fall apart, don't they, mate? That's what I heard. You have to go and speak to the race series owner to try and sort a gearbox out when they turn up.
That was another spanner in the works. A pensioner passed away, and we couldn't play anymore.
Oh yeah, that was
an inconvenience.
That just summed up.
They
my
helped
luck
you with
for the
seat
year.
time.
Yeah, you couldn't have had worse luck.
Just the fucking Queen dying on the day before the event, and once again, you like speak to the venue. Is everything going to be all right? We're going to be able to run. Yeah, it'll be fine. Next morning, do driver briefing. Walk out of driver briefing. Circuit director stood there. Sorry, mate. Like, oh, you are.
But that honestly, that made me personally so angry because the fucking royal family themselves released a statement saying, "Don't cancel anything, carry on," and they were still like, "Yeah, your event's cancelled."
I've no problem with what happened on Three Sisters' side because they're so close to losing drifting at that venue because of sound.
Yeah.
That you know, with them not getting a council approval to run, and the council were like, "Well, we're not saying you can't run," and they're like, "What if we get noise complaints?" And they're like, "Yeah, there'll be noise complaints," and you just know that was going to be it. So they had their hands tied. So it is what it is, and what do they call it? Force majeure, like where
it's Three Sisters, Bryn. Three Sisters is one of those venues where, do you remember last time we were on, we discussed the rocket-propelled car? Prime bunch of residents around Three Sisters. Just over the edge, land on their house, not a problem anymore.
I guess that's another topic to cover at some point, is the choice of venues, I guess, is incredibly limited because drifting is what it is.
Well, okay, choice of venues. There's multiple things people don't think about. So you have to have a track that's wide enough to drift. You have to have a track that works from having the right shape to drift. I'm sure there's a more technical term for that, but you know, then you have to have enough. You have to have enough space because you've got to think, if I'm going to bring 80 drivers, let's say, or more, 97 drivers, T-side night fight, 106 drivers. That's a lot of pit space. That's a lot of pit space. And then we're going to bring 1,000 spectators, and that's going to bring 600 cars. And you're like, where does all that go? So, you know, space-wise is really challenging. Big racetracks do not want drifting anywhere near it. This year, even prior to the Driftland thing, I got on the phone with Knock Hill, and I offered them an amount of money much larger than I actually had to be allowed to do an event there. And they still said no. So, you know, and that's a decent track. Like, and then you look at car parks and things like that, but all car parks are like COVID vaccination centres. So that's been completely ruled out everywhere.
Light posts in a way. Just doesn't work.
Yeah, you look at go-kart tracks, but again, space is the main thing. A lot of them are super narrow.
I doubt you'd have the pit space at a go-kart track as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then anything down south is just got 8 residential areas built next to it. So there's a 96 decibel sound limit, which no drift car ever is getting through.
Mine does. No, mine's 98.
just built in an MX-5.
I mean, the other thing is just outside of drifting, south of the Midlands, there's just no racetracks.
Got Brands.
Liddon
Brands. Hill.
Brands don't do drifting on the actual track. They do it in the paddock next to it.
No, the Brands.
No, they've had it on the track now. But
Okay.
again, that's because Drift Pros go in there not as Drift Pro. It's going there as
it's a support package.
10,000 person car show, TCR or
yeah, I would say it's support to Time Attack most of the time. I think.
There's like 8 championships that run in one weekend and a massive car show that brings 10,000 people in.
Yeah.
So for them, if in that situation a bit of grass gets damaged or a bit of tarmac gets damaged, it's like we can write that off against the huge income. Whereas I want to show up and I'm like, yeah, I'll give you 20 grand, and they're like, yeah, get out.
Because this is the other thing to think about is big tracks, say Donington Park. They, aside from the damage to the actual tarmac itself, they actually care about the grass. And they do get quite mad if you run wide and tear up the grass, which in drifting, let's be honest, everybody loves a good dirt drop.
Donington has proximity sensors around the edge of the track. This is one of the venues I like went after, and somebody got me the circuit manager's phone number. So I just like cold called him out of the blue. And he was probably a bit weirded out, but he had a proper conversation with me about it. And he explained the big thing for like their main track is they have these proximity sensors all the way around the edge of the circuit that will be like, £5,000 each, and there'll be 80 of them, and he'll be like, they'll be just exactly where you guys want to put your wheels at the edge of track, and you're like, fuck. So again, for us that takes out the equation. Donington has Tarmac Lake, and again, massive residential nearby it, noise complaints. Fast R ran a day there in 2019, 2020. I don't know, 1 year. Fast R thing there.
I was so excited.
No drifting has ever happened there again since on Tarmac Lake.
We went there. I did drift taxi there.
Isn't that the Tarmac Lake where you met me, Matt, on the Moss stand? Where
that was
I was out getting rowdy as well.
Yeah.
Back when I had a car to get rowdy in.
Those sensors, it's not like you can turn around to Donington and go, yeah, if we break any, we'll replace them, because they're $5,000 a piece. So they're not cheap.
Also, the thing about big tracks is they don't lend themselves to drifting unless it's pro cars with.
And that's the layout discussion again, because while watching drift cars do 120 mile an hour entries is cool, half of the time the proximity is just not there to go with it.
Okay. Let's go there. Let's steer
it. We're already here, Bryn.
No, I'm going to guide this conversation in a way that I expected we'd probably end up at. And here's a really good segue to get into it. So, Drift Pro is, as you kind of said, they're sort of supporting bigger things. And honestly, it's a glorified sideshow. And it should be really cool. On paper, it should be the absolute top tier cars doing the best stuff on big racetracks. But as you've said, it doesn't work. The tracks are too fast. They're not set up for drifting. And so now what you've got is this thing that's claiming to be a top tier championship that actually, as far as drifters is concerned, is quite shit. It's not what we want. So what I want to get into, Mac, is how did all of that come about? Because in my opinion, one of the worst things that has happened to UK drifting ever was the rift that saw Drift Pro come about and exist. And it should never have happened. And that everyone was a loser out of that whole thing, in my opinion.
Okay, I'm not sure what you're on about, but I'll tell you what I know about things. First of all, my opinion, Drift Pro, is that generally it's actually good for the sport because it's putting drifting in front of a massive audience of people who don't know about it. And we would get people message the BDC Facebook page amongst thousands of spam comments. It gets just like, hey, I saw drifting at this thing. I want to come see more drifting. And you directly see a translation from that. So that's good. And it also is bringing brands into drifting, although in a very limited scope and a very limited amount of brands. But it's not a terrible thing. Okay, so how did it come about? First of all, it was not my time of BDC. Like, I didn't own it. MS UK for a long time have looked at drifting and gone, hey, that's people in cars doing motorsport stuff, but it's not regulated. So BDC, the rule book of BDC was literally what me and my team made up. And anytime we needed to change a rule, the regulation, we just have carte blanche to do it. That's brilliant. It's great. MS UK is all blue book. They always wanted drifting to take a blue book and be regulated. But other series promoters before me said no to it. And when Matt bought it, I know that he was approached by a representative from that side of things and said, as the new owner, bring it into the fold. And he said, no, I've just bought the business. I need to get my feet on the ground with it. I don't want to, it's easy to bring it in, but it's hard to get rid of it, isn't it? Once it's regulated, how do you break away from that regulation, So, and then that ultimately led to Drift Pro forming, which they were very visible to BDC about it. We knew about it months before it was announced. We kind of knew the calendar, we knew the outlay, we knew the 2-year plan. We knew the people that were involved with it, like as far as like certain people who've been advisors to them on the drifting. So we had really good visibility on it. And then I've personally, since taken over, had communication with Andy Barnes, who's sort of the person behind the scenes of it and of Drift Pro, and he came to BDC round 1. I've been invited to go to every round of Drift Pro that exists, but I've never actually been. But that's just more me having family stuff and been around drifting a hell of a lot anyway. So, yeah. So that's kind of Drift Pro. Obviously, I don't know if what you're talking about is all the stuff to do with UKDC and Matt and Sweeps and all the...
All of it. The problem for me is that in the last 3 years or so, we've got this point where drifting has become massively oversaturated and the drivers are spread thin, because we had this point where there were, in theory, 3 pro championships in the UK, which was utterly ridiculous. First, obviously, like you say, you had the UKDC beef and split, and that was bad. And disclaimer, here's my safe word point. I'd just like to say, all beefs are between anyone aside, nothing personal. I have so much respect for Sweeps and what he used to do for practice days and Drift Cup. It was amazing. He was fantastic at running events. The worst thing that Sweeps did was decide to take on the BDC and do his own BDC level championship and get rid of Drift Cup to try and do that. That was bad for everyone, I think. The best setup was when we had Drift Cup for proper, grassroots, feeding into BDC. It was great. Everyone had a good time. And then now we're at this point.
That falling apart is partly what's just ruined drifting. There's like levels to all of it, and there's stuff that I could talk about and I could throw shade and whatever. It's not really worth speaking on. Like what you just said is pretty spot on as far as the fact that like when that happened and UKDC formed and it did cause a split in drivers, there are other things to that, because BDC had never been challenged as that top point. And even though I'm gonna say I fucking rinsed them, like made a joke out of it, I'd like put Sweeps a car on one at fucking Flyers, like it is what it is. But that sounds terrible. But yeah, we showed it, but it was still the fact that it had been challenged that kind of made the status quo of like, well, what makes a drift championship the best one? And even though we've always had a great partnership with Drift League and we work really closely with Gordon's a person who supported BDC loads this year. Like, but then people start going, well, is Drift League better than BDC? And it's like, well, it depends what you want. Like, but it was that conversation that opened up because of it. But the next point, the thing that's really killing drifting is all the people that used to drift and used to be involved with BDC or EDC or fucking Auto Glim D1 Championship or whatever any of the OG shit was. All those people who are about, who come out the woodwork anytime something negative happens with BDC now, just like the other day, especially on Sweeps' little, I'm not man enough to say something bad, but here's a comment section so you can all do it little status, where these guys who you've not heard of for like 10 years are going, well, this has happened, and if only this, and fucking like Huxley's there every time just going, oh, drifting's so terrible now, this is why I quit in 2017, and and it's like, just fucking leave it. We're all doing it for the same reasons you did it. We're doing it because we fucking love it. And people going, well, the right people need to be in charge. And maybe I want the right person. Maybe I didn't have the business know-how. Maybe I, didn't do the budgets right. But you won't have found anyone who was more fucking dedicated to it than me. And you won't have found a better team than the team we put together, who worked the fucking 70 hours over 4 days to fucking make it happen. And all these people that come out every time and they go, oh, it's ruined. Oh, in Sweeps' day, they took us to all these big tracks. Yeah, and you were all a said dicks and you fucking ruined it, and now we're not allowed back to them. And Andy Barnes has got his own little championship, and we're all fucking locked out. And it's the one thing that like pisses me off so much. Like,
times have changed, and people need to remember that.
I think your biggest issue at the moment is social media, just as a whole. This is a whole different subject, but social media as a whole is a great place for just breeding negativity.
Yeah,
100%.
Anything
Facebook
that happens,
is just cancer. It's like the Facebook comments of anything. You could analyze every comment made on a BDC post over the last 4 years. I guarantee like 70% of them would be either neutral or negative. People never want to comment something nice. Never go, oh, that was really good. If we do, it's so few and far between. Like, but if something's a bit wrong, or a ticket's a bit overpriced, or
you're not allowed to bring your lunchbox in,
you're not allowed to bring your sandwiches with you to an event, then that's it. And that's the one. That's the one again. Huxley. I don't want to just pick on Huxley because he's probably a great guy. I think I've met him once ever. But that was the one where he was going, this is why I quit drifting. And I'm like, what? Did fucking Dave Egan come and take your lunch off you one day or something? Like, calm down. No one cares.
I'm picturing Drift Games just stealing his lunchbox.
Yeah, but I guess that was kind of what I was getting at with that very pointed question, was the point at which everything started to go south when the pandemic happened and everything was getting a bit shaky. That's when we needed everyone to come together and keep things going, and that's when that split happened, wasn't it? That's when that split happened, and we got, instead of, okay, things are a bit bad for everybody, let's all pull together, do what we're good at, keep drifting going. That's when you got, we're all going to do our own thing.
Initially,
it's not what we needed.
So in 2019, Matt and Sweeps got off on the wrong foot because they did Drift Games Nationals, and Drift Games Nationals, I don't know if people remember this, it was meant to be 2 classes. So there's Drift Games Extreme, which was the pro, but Nationals was going to be 2 classes. It was going to be semi-pro, like Pro 2, Pro-Am, and then a lower tier that was a IADC Readers Drift Cup level competition. But they had a lack of sign-up, so they folded it together. And Drift Cup drivers from the UK who'd signed up in Ireland suddenly were in a Pro-Am class. And Matt said, if you come to BDC and you qualify, same as if you came from Drift Cup, you get a at the time Pro-Am license. And him and Sweeps fell out big time about that. And then at round 1, there were only 32 drivers in Pro-Am. So everyone got a license. And they fell out like shit all year about it. And there's other bits, but whatever. And at the end of that year, we had a sit down, and it was Paul McCallum, Sweeps, me, and Matt. And we cleared the air, made a plan, made a new system for how people would progress. It was going to be harder to get into BDC. You know what I mean? And it was going to work for everyone. It was going to be totally fine. So actually, the day we cancelled Three Sisters, I was in the van with Matt that night going somewhere, and Sweeps phoned him, and they had like a totally open, like supportive chat for each other. And Sweeps like, oh yeah, we might lose our round 1, but then we've got a bigger break till like, the next round, so we should be fine. And everything was good with them both. And then a little bit later, as the pandemic progressed and we went into lockdown, that's when Sweeps went, people shouldn't run events. So he cancelled his events, and, we didn't. And that's when people want to drive in BDC. We went from having 40 signed up drivers in Pro-Am because people financially impacted down to like 20. We're like, what are we going to do? And it was actually me. It was me. I went, let's do this permit thing, Matt. And I designed this banging like application system and did all the bits on the website. I went, this is great. People love this. It'll get loads of attention. We'll pick the best drivers. We'll do this. We'll do that. So Matt went, yeah, told Sweeps. The rest's history. But yeah, in the beginning, there was still a good relationship up to that COVID point, and then that's when it fell apart. And that's another one of the impacts of COVID people don't see. People just say, oh, so it got impacted because you lost a bunch of money that year. They don't see that happened. They don't see that the next year, every hiring for the event basically went up by 50% because all those companies are trying to claw back money. Like, there's so many knock-ons from it.
But that was a big shame because I got into not as a driver, everyone I'm sure knows that, but I got into pro drifting through Drift Cup, came up to BDC, and that experience was fantastic. Sweeps was great at running a grassroots feeder championship. It was fun. Everybody loved it. Then you get into BDC, and that cooperation and the way that worked was fantastic. And it felt to me like when that split happened and we lost all of that, that was a big blow to both sides. Both sides lost out of that, I think.
Yeah, and that rift and everything that happened, like as a result of it, it's that separation that it's created that's been the problem within the inner drift community. And like, you think now to new fans who discover drifting and they go, oh, that's really cool. I love those cars. They go look it up on Facebook and then they go, oh, I love Martin Wonacott's Chaser. I like his page. And then you follow a bit of Martin Wonacott and then you find someone else. And the next thing you know, you look at it and you're like, wow, why are these other 500 people just hating on everything? And what's this? And the golden era. And why is it not the golden era now? And
there's that weirdly, you can actually make this comparison if you start thinking about Formula One. Because there's a lot of you get it with a bit of this whole Drive to Survive fans and that sort of thing. But that again, that's another subject. But you will always find people within any championship that says, oh yeah, the stuff 20 years ago was the golden era. Or the stuff in the case of Formula One 50 years ago was the golden era. And it's the same in British touring cars. And they'll go back and say, yeah, this old stuff was better. And it's like, this is a circle that will rinse and repeat forever. It's not going to go away. If the BDC carried on running for another 10 years, in 10 years, people will say the stuff in 2020 was the golden era.
It's that nostalgic thing that people look back at all motorsport with. You know, Matt, if you try and have a conversation with me about Formula One, I will tell you it's been rubbish since James Hunt and Niki Lauda were driving. And I wasn't even alive when they were driving. I grew up watching videos of them. And I just, there was more risk. That's the thing that makes motorsport exciting to me.
And this actually is such a weird thing that I bring up, but I saw somebody did a whole thread on this. And he went back and watched, I think, every single Formula One race from about 1975. I must have spent months and months doing this. Followed up with all the news stories that they could find all the way across. And they're like, yeah, the topics that people are talking about now are exactly the same as they were 50 years ago. Just with updated tracks and drivers. So that's never going to change. It doesn't matter who you talk to or how much time passes.
But we should return to drifting because that's actually what we're here.
It's an analogy that I want to. It's just an analogy that I want to make. That's the same as drifting is now. It's the same thing. It's the same with every motorsport, and nostalgia is always going to win.
People are just so convinced that the grass is greener. Do you know what I mean? And we can go back now and watch. You go BDC 2012 on YouTube when people who talk about that era, like, it was the best thing ever. And I'm sure when you were there and you lived it, it was fucking awesome. And it was great. But it doesn't compare to what you've got now. And maybe some things were better because, it was more cost efficient because people had, 400 brake horsepower cars, not 800 brake horsepower cars. And people did run road tires, not stupid semi-slick tires. But the drivers now, that's what they want. They want this big thing that they apparently can't afford to do anymore, but that's like a personal circumstance thing. People say, oh, well, back then everyone had matching liveries and teams. I'm like, yeah, we didn't ban that. In fact, we encourage people to do that, but they just don't do it anymore. And everyone had big sponsors. And I've heard from companies, I go, hey, can you sponsor BDC? And they go, oh, we worked with this particular driver back then. We gave him $5,000 for the season. I went, oh, what did you get? They were like, nothing. We gave him $5,000. We never heard from them again. Like, oh, right, okay.
A good way of doing it, because you can't go somebody and say, go and relive the 2012 championship and then last year's championship and tell me and compare the two. You can't do that. I would say somebody go back and play your favorite childhood video game now, and then come back to me when you finished it and say, is that still a good game?
I'm gonna answer you're gonna say no. I'm gonna answer that for everybody as someone with a retro console collection. Don't do it. It's really bad. It's not fun, right?
Unless it's Need for Speed.
Super Mario Brothers was not designed to be played on a 70-inch telly. right? You plug your NES into a 70-inch telly, and all you see is pixels.
Yeah, and this is the point is if you take off your rose-tinted nostalgia glasses and actually look at it with a bit of common sense, it's not better. Let's be honest.
So the moral of Matt's rant is stop eating member berries. That's what we're saying, right?
Yeah, just stop. Everybody just needs to stop looking at drifting now, who used to be a part of it, who've chosen not to be in it anymore for whatever reasons.
Yeah.
And they need to stop shitting on it.
Like, I really enjoyed doing it.
Yeah, okay then. So if we're talking about the nostalgia, let's get to the positive bit.
Yeah, let's
talk about what was good in your time running the BDC Mac. What did you really love? Because I can tell you what I loved. I can tell you two moments that I thought were incredible.
I can say one, but I think it might be before your time, actually.
I think the sensible thing to do here, as wrapping up the episode, because we've got to finish on a high, is for the next 15 minutes, let's just go through our favourite moments of the BDC, and I've only got one. Right,
yeah, I've got one.
And it's that I've only got one point of reference, but it was absolutely brilliant. And I've got to say, Mac, you're the only race series owner that I've ever run up to and gone, do you know if anyone's got gearbox for an MX-5? It's gone, yeah, and there's one over there. Go fetch it. Right, that was the conversation. It was get the guy back out on track. That was genuinely one of, and I'm from a Manx TT bike racing family. Right, I've been around it my entire life, and that was one of my best trackside experiences ever, was the fact that you just wanted the event to go on, mate. You just wanted everyone to be having a good time.
I conveniently had an MX-5 in parts at the event as well, so it
wasn't rigged or nothing. We didn't plan it.
we did have a conversation about taking the gearbox out of Jojo's car that was parked by your BDC merch stand as well.
Oh, so we starting with the highlight of me then, yeah?
Yeah. But that's all I've got. That's my point of reference, Milton, you know? That is
one of mine was, I couldn't, because I can't go because I've got family and kids and stuff, so it's sometimes hard for me to get out. But watching the battle of Jojo and the blue PS13 Danny Wyman, and just watching them two push each other around track, it was a proper both ways. It was one of the best battles I've ever seen.
Notably, neither of those cars with 800 brake horsepower or crazy spec, just two good drivers in mid-spec cars.
Well, it's
drivers.
It's a good point, because obviously everybody here knows that I was building an RX-7 the goal was to get to BDC, but my goal was never to build an 800 horsepower monster. I was going to start at 450, which is, for all of the tracks that BDC ever goes to, is more than enough. I think part of the problem was everybody was just over-speccing their cars.
Yeah, so everyone had to keep buying bigger tyres, more power to keep up. It was a arms race, which is why the control tyre was really good.
Back to good things. One of my favourite memories from BDC was when you ran, I don't know whether this was your time or not, but they ran a sort of drift games, they called it, style thing, in the sort of, I think it was a lunch break or sort of in between practice and qualifying. And one of them I remember was best backwards entry at Rockingham. And I just remember it was my first. I think it was the year that Huxley had the Corona. Was it
Corona? Yeah.
2017 round one is what you're talking about.
Yeah,
there.
And he had it all in grey. And I just remember it was one of the first runs, and he just sent it in just over 90 degrees backwards towards his grandstand. It's like, this is the best thing ever.
Him beating Simon Perry. I know I just shit talked him a bit, but whatever. But him versus Simon Perry when he was dooring the GTR in the Corolla was like fucking crazy good.
On 15-inch tyres.
I was watching live stream that year, and I was like, this is fucking mental.
Yeah.
Like,
I remember that event because I think he may have gone against him in a battle, and you have this massive GTR with a tiny Corolla parked up next to it on the good start line. And I think that's one of the things for me was Huxley's car was like, you don't have to build a stupidly specced out car. You can have something that looks cool and it'll still win.
He was on 15-inch tyres as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was running full like 15s all round, stance to fuck, like practically on the ground.
Go on, Bryn. What was your?
Oh, mine actually are definitely both Mac things. They are things that Mac did very well, and I didn't plan that. That's just the ones that stuck in my mind. So the first one was, you mentioned earlier, bringing some of the kind of the all-star European drivers onto the grid. And I remember that round you mentioned at Teesside, where you had Sebastian Fonten and Clint came, but that was the first time that I had seen some of those guys on track, and against the dudes from the UK. Sisters. Sorry?
Teesside or Three Sisters?
Three Sisters is the one that sticks in my mind, because I'd heard of Sebastian Fonten, but never seen him drive. And I was stood trackside as a marshal, and I watched this guy throw 2 backwards entries, losing 0 momentum on his qualifying run. And it was the most insane thing I'd ever seen. And you just brought this dude, and I was like, fuck, these dudes are here to party. Like,
yeah, I remember that event. That event just insane.
You know, Sebastian is one of my favorite drivers, probably one of my favorite drivers to watch in the whole world, which is why I went out of my way to make sure he was there. Didn't pay him, never paid a driver to drive in BDC ever. It's not, I know, a thing other promoters have done, not something I've ever done, but you know, we gave enough incentive to be there, and he wanted to come because he saw how good BDC was that year. So I was super excited to see him drive. But when qualifying started, I was away dealing with something else. Everyone was like, oh my God, did you see that run? And I didn't see that run for like 4 days when I finally got time to sit down and watch the live stream back. And I was like, holy shit. Like, so yeah.
That felt
Sebastian coming in was like crazy.
The way that he drove, and you brought him in, and it was just like, it was not like you brought somebody who didn't belong because he was too good, but just he threw down, and I think everybody in the grid watched that and went, fuck, I want to drive like that guy. That's who I want to be now. And that was a good moment for everyone, I think. And then the other one, slightly controversial potentially, Teesside night fight with all the lights, the neon parade, because that got rowdy. That got out of hand. Like, for anyone who didn't see it, or any of you guys, presumably, Bam, you wouldn't have watched it, you wouldn't know. It was a parade
it's
thing.
On the live stream. You can see it, but you'll not really understand without being there. Like.
Yeah. So they sent all the drivers round. This was a parade. You know, was it like before the battle, or like between 32 and 16?
It was basically, it was either, I think, it was maybe like between top 32 and 16 in Pro-Am. Do you want to know how it got so rowdy?
Who started it?
Yeah,
Who started it?
Before the event, we announced the neon parade. It was actually the whole thing. We wanted to get people out with the lights on, but Lindsay said to me, she went, "You should do a neon parade." So credit.
It's all Lindsay's fault.
So it's all Lindsay's fault.
For God's sake, Lindsay.
So we did. So we said we'd do it. We told drivers we were going to do it. We said, "Get neons on your car." We messaged, I don't remember the name of it, some neon company in the UK, and got drivers a discount if they bought this specific, like, whatever neon kit or whatever it was called. You know, they got all the neons on the car. We put up a cash prize, £100 for best car in Pro-Am Pro 2 for the neons on. We were like, this will be cool. And Stu Jones phoned me like 2 days before the event, and he went, all right, yeah, do it. So it's just a parade lap. I went, yeah. And he went, can I do like a burnout or something? And I went, yeah, go on then. Like, Stu, again, good mate of mine. We're both on slide back in the day. He tiled that kitchen wall for me over there. You can see there. So we're like good friends. I don't, yeah, go on then, man, do it. So the neon parade starts up. We've allotted so much time for it when the schedule we're going, and then they start sending the cars out. And I look over to the left where I'm stood in front of the judging tower, and the first car going across the line is Stu Jones, and he just boots it and spins the tires up. And I went, "Oh dear!"
Because as a driver, you go, if he's doing it, I want to do it.
Getting rowdy.
It's one of those classic moments. It was at that moment you knew you fucked up.
Yeah, but did I fuck up? Because I got fined thousands of pounds by Teesside. Yes, I fucked up.
Really? Oh,
but it was worth it, and it was just an iconic moment. But it got so out of hand that people who weren't going to do it saw how rowdy it was and ran to their cars. Kevin Quinn has like some secret anti-lag setting on his car that God knows what it actually does to the engine. But that thing came out and it was just like, and like the guys in the live stream trailer were just like, it was shaking the windows when it came past. Like it was mental. And yeah, so Teesside were pretty upset about that. So sorry, Teesside, but it was one of the best moments ever of like this ridiculous year. 106 drivers. We had probably about 60 people go out on track, and like the drone was just flying around, getting it all on.
I've had an idea. Forget BDC. Call it the Neon Parade Championship.
Only night events. Is that what you're now asking for next, Mills? Only night events. Everybody's
all the cars
have
got to be below 80 decibels, so you don't have to worry about noise limits, and it's just showing off and looking cool.
No, but it been loud, even though that's like the worst thing that's killing drifted in the UK. It was also just because my eardrums rung for about 4 hours after that ended. Like I was trackside with it, and Jesus, it was like mental. It was
savage. And like I said, Stu Jones was the first car out. He did not let off the limiter until he got round to me and I think Ian that was with me. His car broke down, so much smoke, no one else can see him. It's night and the car's not moving. So we're just there on track, like trying to wave at people round this car. They don't know what's going on. They're doing 360s. There's flames everywhere. There's smoke everywhere. And you're just like, someone's going to die. And I just remember standing there surrounded by neon lights with just the most ridiculous noise everywhere. Like this moment I will remember till the day I die, because this is fucking stupid. And it was so good.
Good days.
I think that might be the perfect moment to wrap up with that high.
Max not done his.
Matt's not done his. Matt's not done his. Quick, Matt.
That's what we're wrapping up with. He's got to tell us his favourite moment from BDC as a whole.
Three moments for me in BDC that stand out. So the first one is before I had it. So 2018, the Invasion, the last event Egan did. So super cool event, because everybody was like, who's the new BDC owner? And I was there, I knew because it was Matt. I was like, I know. But that wasn't why it was cool. But the event was crazy. The driver list that they had, so many international drivers, and particularly the final when it was Dwayne versus Vasquez in the final, and Vasquez won, and no one had beaten Dwayne all year, and then Vasquez beat him, and that was just like the whole event and everything. And the end of that era of BDC, you know, when it all went downhill from there. Bring back Dave. But yeah, so that was for me as a fan of BDC, and I was doing media that year. Like that was crazy, and that was always the bar that I held myself to, was that event. And I think Night Fight was the first time when I got close to that. Or some people say I did it. Some people I thought Night Fight was my best event, but whatever, subjective. The golden era. My number two moment would be, there was a point probably just as Pro 2 qualifying was going live at BDC 2021 round one at Teesside with all the walls, when just the how surreal it was that like I had put that event on, and I have a wicked team and a load of people who worked on it, but like that was the first time I was like, wow, this is my drift championship. This is what we've done. We've got all these drivers. I was like emotional about it, and I was sort of, I'd gone up into the tower to go and survey things from up there, and I was like, wow, this is like a crazy moment. So that was another one. And then number three, which is actually at the last event we ran, which was at Buxton at the controversial Don't Bring a Sandwich event. There wasn't a lot good at that event, but when we sent out the Shanahans to go and do a battle on the BDC. So none of you were there for this, right? And there was no live stream, and I don't think it's really very documented, but we basically got the Shanahans. They had asked because Matt Sowery just ran like a kidney oval layout, but Buxton, we ran the BDC Buxton line for the BDC cars, and the Shanahans had asked if they could do the line and do a battle in their, bash cars. So we said yeah and sent them out, and it was really good. And then Harry Kerr was there and Sebastian Fontaine was there also in E36s. And they were like, can we do it? So they did it. And then we were like, this is cool. And me and Lisa were just in the tower, just messing around on commentary. And we were like, we should send all 4 of them out at once. So we did. And all 4 of them, who'd only ever done 2 laps apiece of this layout, went out and did a 4-car train around a layout that came back on itself with a roundabout in perfect door-on-door, again, in the dark with the lights on. And, oh, it was fucking so awesome. Just like, yeah. So that was one of the top ones as well. No particular order for those 3, but those are my 3 moments.
Sure, it wasn't like a wildcard entry like on Three Sisters.
Milton, my girlfriend's gearbox.
Black MX-5 pink through. Yeah.
Thanks. Take that.
Or just after Driftland when we got banned. So yeah, it's been crazy, and the memories of it all. And people need to remember, like, I did it all for loving it. I did it because I'm a fan of drifting, and I was watching live stream in 2017, and I saw the slide suicide run on the live stream where they were sent the 2 cars each way and crossed over on the bank at Teesside, and like
how did health and safety sign that off?
Teesside didn't know about it until it happened. But we're not happy. But yeah, that was the moment when I said I want to get involved. And when you think, oh, I'm going to get involved, do media bits, I'll get on media. I had no idea I would ever own the championship. I had no idea that in 2021, running against a really established promoter with all the fucking odds against me, that I would pull off such an outwardly successful year. It blows my fucking mind to have done that. And then this year, when, let's be honest, it all kind of went to shit, but that we got through it and we pulled it off at a point where we should have been bankrupt like halfway through the end, and we did it. And to have achieved all of that in such a small space of time, like, I'm gutted that it's over, but I can look back on it and be like, some of the memories and to meet the people and be involved and do that, like, it's so crazy. And I'm grateful that we had the people to pull it off and to do it, and to everyone who was a part of it, and the sponsors who did back it and the drivers who showed up every round and committed and drove, and yeah, awesome, like, awesome.
You did good. You did good.
You definitely did good, mate. For someone to for me to go to an event and turn around to these guys afterwards and go, I get it now. They've been getting me to come to stuff and watch for years, and I've gone, nah, it's just idiots going sideways around a track. And then that event with Milton,
one event.
and they're just one event, the only event I'd been to that you'd put on, and I got it.
You're right though, it is idiots just skidding around, but yeah. It's fun.
And we've all done things that lead to people getting banned from things. Like Matt can't have a car meet outside his house because of antics that me and my friends did when we were younger in Cannock. But that's the
tangent. Bam.
Tangent. Yeah, I need to wrap this up, don't I? So first things first. Sorry for anyone who had a dog bark in the middle of that. Someone knocked on my front door and set my dog off. Matt, thanks for coming on. Thanks for telling us all what really went down. Hopefully we've got everything that everybody wanted to know about. Hopefully we've answered a few questions for people. I, for one, am gutted there's not going to be a next season that we can drag Milton to and see how many more bits of his car we can break.
I can't say I'm building a car for BDC anymore.
No. What? I mean, we're all kind of, we've shattered Matt's dreams, so there's that.
That's
Sorry,
all I want to John, folks. You just shattered all my dreams, and I've got
just
nowhere
pissed
to go.
on his cornflakes, Matt.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I've
Matt's crying.
I've got to go and do Formula G now.
Hey.
So yeah. That's been Milton.
Yours.
That's been Matt.
I have no dreams anymore.
Still can't get this right. That's been Brent. And that's been our special guest, Mac Frost. Thanks for joining us, Mac.
Anytime.
Toodles. And cut.